Ice swimming. Who in their right mind would do such a thing? Yeah, okay. But I'm not doing it without my suit. Last weekend in January, I went to the beautiful city of Faaborg on Fyn here in Denmark to photograph the Danish Ice Swimming Championship. And I made this video about it. This is going to be a fairly long video, but I'll try to spice it up as much as possible with photos and videos, just to minimize your exposure to my crummy face. I've also marked the chapters down here, so that you can skip to the next one or go directly to the conclusion in the end. Full disclosure, for the event, Sony had lent me 3 cameras and a lens for me to test out. But Sony has not paid me anything for this video, and they didn't ask anything of me, except that I returned the gear afterwards, unfortunately. The event was organized by Outdoor Sydfyn, and it was the second time Faaborg hosted the event. It had already grown a lot since 2024, with more participants and 3 days of swimming instead of 2. It took place in the harbor of Faaborg, which, except for some seaweed, is clean. And it's not like swimming in the Seine in Paris, where you might end up or your guts out after you've been in the water. As mentioned, Sony had lent me gear for the event. It was the brand new Sony A1II, the flagship camera. It was the ZV-E1 and ZV-E10 Mark II vlogging cameras, and the 85mm f1.4 GM2 lens. I used the ZV-E1 and my A7IV in these Sea Frogs underwater housings, and the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, which I kind of ended up with because of a small miscommunication with Sony here in Denmark, turned out to be the perfect lightweight match with my DJI RS3 mini gimbal when paired with this small lens, the Sony 16-35 f4 power zoom. I've never worked with this many cameras before, but it was very nice to have a camera set up for every planned shot. It also turned out to be very practical with different cameras for outside and inside shooting. Because if I rushed in from the cold with a camera and a lens, the lens would just fog up. I'm not saying the other thing you might think I'm saying. This did, however, mean that I had a ton of memory cards to empty every evening. And since I used some of the cameras for both photo and video, I had to concentrate just to make sure that I offloaded and sorted everything correctly. Let's get to the interesting part. Camera heaven. An extra long weekend at a fantastic sporting event with both the brand new Sony A1 Mark II and the Sony A9 Mark III. I've been using the Sony A9III for almost a year now, and I've been nothing but pleased with it. But I was keen to find out whether the A1II would be a better choice for me. The event started early Friday afternoon, and the weather was quite bad. It was grey, overcast, windy and raining, and during winter time it gets dark pretty early here in Denmark. And besides that, the area was lit up by pretty bad LED lights. The cameras were definitely pushed to their limits, but I still managed to get some good shots. Saturday started out grey as well, but the wind calmed down throughout the day, and we even had a few holes in the cloud cover and a bit of sunshine in the afternoon. To compensate for the fairly low light in the beginning of the day, I photographed at a somewhat slow shutter speed. It wasn't a problem when there was little movement, and I even ended up with some cool shots of the swimmers competing, where the slower shutter speed actually emphasized the movement. Sunday, the weather was also quite grey, but the wind was calm the entire day. By then I had gotten most of the photographs and video shots I had planned, so I had a bit more time to just play around. I took my A7IV, a camera launched about 3.5 years ago. That's more than 30 years in dog years, and in electronic digital years it's probably even more. But I took my A7IV and I paired it with the Sony 85mm f1.4 GM2 lens. It's only about half a year old, so it's still a puppy. I ended up with probably my favorite photo from that entire weekend. This one. It's mother and daughter having a lovely time with each other and enjoying themselves at a big event with hundreds of other swimmers who find joy in tormenting themselves in cold water. The background is wiped out and mother and daughter are completely separated from their surroundings. Black is black, white is white, and everything in between and the colors just looks fantastic. On the outside, the two Sony flagship cameras are identical. They're the same size, they have the buttons placed in the same position, so switching between the two cameras is very easy. The ports on the side are placed differently, and for some reason the left side strap attachment is around 1 millimeter higher on the A1II than on the A9III, which I found out when I tried to fit the A1II into my tilter cage for the A9III. I like to use a cage to attach a screen recorder, a camera, and other accessories. It's not a big deal. The cage and accessory producers will adapt, but just be aware that you cannot use the same cage for both cameras unless the manufacturer specifies it. I mostly do photo and a lot less video, so I won't be getting much into all the video features. It is my impression that the A1II is a very good hybrid camera, but it's not a part of the cinema line, and I wouldn't expect the same qualities and features. The A9III, with its global shutter, makes it impossible to get any kind of rolling shutter, but it does have a base ISO of 2000 and not in any way the low light capabilities as you can find on, for example, an FX3. The A9III has 8 stops of image stabilization and the A1II has 8.5. I can't tell the difference, but perhaps it's more evident when you're doing video. A few days ago, I went with my wife and youngest daughter to a beautiful castle only about 15 minutes from here, where they had a big light festival named Luminis. I shot this photo with my A9III, handheld at 1/3 of a second. I wanted to blur out the people walking past, but I didn't bring a tripod. But look at the quality. The bricks and window bars, they're pin sharp, and no movements from me affected the image. The autofocus on the two cameras is nearly identical, and I couldn't tell the difference at an event with fast sports, such as swimming. I did shoot the A9III at a high frame rate, and I did discard more photos from that camera, but it more had to do with the fact that I had more photos to choose from, and in most situations still only needed one or a few photos from a certain situation or of a specific person. The A1II has the autofocus where it can switch between subjects. The A9III doesn't have it, and it didn't get it with the latest 3.0 firmware update. I do, however, not often find myself switching between planes and cats numerous times throughout a shoot, and I'm normally pretty set on what I want to photograph. So I would just like the camera to focus on that alone and not search for other subjects as well. Auto subject recognition is not a function I miss in a camera.
Fine by me!
The A1II has a mechanical shutter which can be used for photography, and the A9III also has a mechanical shutter of some sort, but it's only used as sensor protection, and it only closes if the camera is not set to silent mode when you turn it off. The processors and the AI autofocus chip are the same, and the only major difference between the two cameras is the image sensor, and really the only thing you need to think about if you're considering buying any of them. Here's a technical overview of the two cameras. The A1II definitely has more to offer when it comes to megapixels and ISO range, but the A9III is untouchable on shutter speed and frame rate. The A9III can shoot at 1/80,000th of a second, and with the latest 3.0 software update, you can now shoot that fast at any aperture. Look at this, it's a series of shots at 120 frames per second, and I can freaking pick and choose any frame from a 5 times 120 frames per second slow motion movie and get exactly the 14-bit uncompressed RAW photo I want. If I wanted 14-bit uncompressed RAW with the A1II, I would only have gotten every 6th of these images. Perhaps I would have been lucky and nailed the perfect shot anyway, but chances are a lot smaller. The 85mm f1.4 GM2 lens deserves its own video, and maybe I'll do that, but for now it will just have to settle with a few comments in this video. I own several prime lenses, and I have either owned or tried most of the primes from Sony, and I personally believe that the 85mm GM2 is just one of the best Sony native prime lenses. It's pin sharp and it has the perfect weight to focal length ratio. I have owned the 135 GM lens for a short period. I think it's actually one of the only lenses I've ever bought used, simply to test it out. for a period. It definitely has good image quality, but I found it to be very big and heavy, and it is a 1.8 and not a 1.4. My normal concert setup is the 16-35 f2.8 GM2, the 50mm f1.2 GM, and the 70-200 f2.8 GM2 lens. That's the most versatile setup I'm able to get with the fewest lenses. But sometimes the 2.8 aperture of the zoom lenses simply doesn't let in enough light. The 85mm lens is a fantastic lens, and paired with my 24mm f1.4 GM lens, it would be the perfect low-light, lightweight concert kit. That's why I also just ordered one, and I really look forward to using it some more. Sony Denmark was kind enough to both deliver and pick up the gear I bought from them here at my home. And the same morning they came to pick it up, I had just a bit of time to play around, test out some more. I didn't have time to test the rolling shutter, for example, while driving. But I got my drone and 3 Sony cameras, and I went out into my garden. This is the Sony A9III, just as you would expect. The propeller blades are completely frozen in time. This is the Sony A1II. It's not quite the same, but better than I expected. When the propellers are horizontal, they don't look much bent, but when they're vertical, it's more obvious. The biggest surprise was the Sony A7IV. It does of course have fewer megapixels than the A1II, but the readout speed is hardly that much slower, otherwise the propeller would have looked much more bent. Just a small test, and let's face it, no one photographs drones. But if you do decide to get into that line of work, the A9III with its global shutter is the only way to go. After 4 days and thousands of photos, I kind of found myself choosing a different camera for different situations. When the swimmers were in the water, I used my A9III. It just gave me more material to choose from. When photographing the atmosphere and the participants when they were not moving rapidly, I used the A1II most of the time. But in the brief period of time where I used my A7IV and combined it with the 85mm GM2 lens, I ended up with some pretty fine photos. Photos where most people wouldn't be able to tell which camera they were shot with. Have a look at these 6 photos and try to figure out which Sony camera they were photographed with. In most situations, no one would be able to. Do you want 50 megapixels or can you settle with 24? For me, 24 is not a problem. I compose images with my camera and my lenses and not my computer, and I never found myself lacking pixels. The much mentioned dynamic range, well, unless you're photographing colorful fashion in a studio or art or animals close up, you'd probably never notice. And when doing sports, getting the right shot trumps missing out on a bit of the highlights and shadows once in a while. If you want something unique and you're sure you need the speed and will take advantage of all the possibilities and features of the global shutter, get the A9III. How often do you need 1/80,000th of a shutter speed? Not often, but when you do, you can do something unusual. And you can even sync flash at that speed, so it opens up a lot of new creative options. I haven't done a lot of flash photography with my A9III, but I really should. For fast sports, the A9III is unbeatable. As a concert and indoor camera, I'm not sure. It's fast, it works really well, and banding is a thing of the past. But I would love to bring both cameras to a concert or an indoor sport event of some sort and see how they compare in all the artificial light. The most versatile camera for photography is definitely the A1II. And if you're into wildlife and birds where the most accurate color rendition and the best dynamic range is important, it's the best camera for you. However, before you start considering any of these 2 cameras, make sure you have the right lenses to put in front of the camera. You need the best possible glass to get the full effect of these expensive cameras. If you're just starting out and cannot afford a top-of-the-line camera, get the A7IV. It's a really good camera, and in a lot of situations, it will do the job just as good as the high-end cameras, and no one would be able to tell the difference. There's been rumors of an A7V coming out soon. I don't know anything about that, But when it eventually launches, it will be an even better choice and probably the best possible value for money. For the price of an A1II or an A9III, you could get the A7IV or 5 and two of the three GM zoom lenses from the Holy Trinity or three GM prime lenses, and it will cost you about the same and you'd be very, very well off. Then, if you get more serious or perhaps start making money, you can upgrade your A cam and keep the other one as a B cam or sell it. Besides the A1II or the A9III, it will also be worth considering the Sony A7R5. I've had both the Sony A7R4 and the A7R5, and they're damn fine cameras. Not the best for sports and concerts, but very suitable for landscape and architecture, and perhaps the best Sony choice for portraits. I think I will eventually end up with both the A1II and the A9III. That would be a dream combo. For now, I'm sticking with my A9III and my A7IV. The A7IV also fits my underwater housing. As mentioned, I just ordered the 85mm GM2. Then later I'll probably try to scrape enough money together for the 300mm GM lens with a couple of teleconverters. And afterwards, I would like to get one of the A7Cs for street photography. So I won't be getting the A1II in the very near future. But the conclusion of the conclusion, for most people, the Sony A1II is the best choice. For me, the perfect camera is still the A9III. And make sure you got good lenses to put in front of whatever camera you do have or end up with. If you're still here, thanks for watching, and thanks to Sony here in Denmark for lending me some of their equipment. Please stick around just a little bit longer for a few of my top picks from the Danish Ice Swimming Championship 2024. Perhaps even consider hitting the like and subscribe button. It will make it easier for me to produce more videos like this. See you around.
I don't know what to do now. Need to figure it out, but I don't know how. I hope the wind will carry me and take me away to where I should be.